Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Solar Opposites. Okay, so this episode, the Pupa's Big Day, so essentially this episode is just, it takes the bit from the end of the last episode where they're waiting in line and makes that a full episode. That is essentially what happens. But, yeah, in any case, Corvo, in any case, an episode starts, and Corvo is obviously still pissed that it's an entire episode later, and they're still very much standing in line. And does point out that he's getting tired of standing in line, and wishes that he could go literally anywhere else. But, of course, Terry reassures him that he can't just leave the line because they obviously need to respect the rules and etiquette of the line, and that they can't leave. And of course Corvo explains that they need to leave anyway because it's around the time where he's actually supposed to show, and this is the reveals in this episode, but it's revealed that the intro is actually a video that Corvo shows the solar opposites every morning. But Terry reveals that they're not going to be doing that because he already has it loaded up on his phone, and the entire bit is that they watch it on his phone. And Corvo is very upset about the fact that they actually never leave the line, and is upset about the fact that they're just doing a whole standing in line bottle episode, which of course infuriates him to no end. And it's at this point where, but of course it's also revealed that apparently Corvo doesn't realize that he says something new every episode until Terry says something to him. But in any case, the episode continues with them being infuriated about the fact that they're currently still standing in line. They're not particularly happy. The solar opposites aren't particularly happy about the fact that they're standing in line. At which point the Pupa decides to leave by taking a bottle, drinking it, and just turning into a giant and proceeding to leave. And of course, Corvo immediately wants to go and go check that out, and points out that they want to leave, but that he wants to leave and go check out what the Pupa is going to do, and points out that he's probably going to get into some sort of shenanigans. But Terry once again insists that they can't actually leave the line because that's breaking of line etiquette. And of course he then proceeds to get back in the line because he realizes that they can't leave, and is infuriated with Terry about being so absent about them staying in line. But of course Terry points out that it's actually a Category 5 line, which of course confuses Jesse and wonders why they're actually how he actually categorizes their lines like they do hurricanes. And of course, Terry explains that not only is this a combination of several other major lines, but he also points out that there's a lot of pro-line standers in the line as well. Citing that there was a guy who once held his pee for 72 hours, another woman who wound up stabbing the guy for cutting in line and wound up serving time for that. And also a third guy who stood in line for an Xbox when there was a drought. But yeah, the episode is just the episode. But yeah, of course, Corvo is kind of a little bit impressed that Terry knows so much about it, and about how, and with Jesse pointing out that it feels like they're standing with a bunch of celebrities. But Corvo, of course, is just still very much annoyed about being in the line. But it does point out that he hopes that he is going to try and keep an idea with standing with Terry. But it's at this point where eventually Yumulak gets frustrated and leaves, and sees a line that seemingly is moving faster, but Terry points out that it's a rookie mistake, pointing out that just because the line is moving faster doesn't mean it's the best line to be standing in. Pointing out that the best lines are the ones that are not barely moving at all. But Yumulak points out that's stupid and immediately goes into the faster moving line. And I'm just going to cover this. As it turns out, Yumulak goes on a whole seat plot where he's standing in his quote unquote faster line. But unwittingly, he winds up getting stuck in a decathlon, and he winds up winning that throughout the course of the episode. And he doesn't even realize that he's not even standing in a line. He thinks he's just standing in a line, but in actuality, he just did a decathlon, and when he finishes, he points that out. He points out, hey, I'm not supposed to be in the. He thought he was standing in line, but in actuality, he did a decathlon and winds up getting a lot more excited than he should be, and points out that he was in the best line ever. But with the guy at the end pointing out that it's not actually a line. But Yeah, the episode just kind of makes fun of that. He's just off on his own little adventure. But of course, Corvo is trying to talk to Jesse, pointing out that they need to, that obviously she can't be in the line either. But of course, Jesse is actually doing her own little side plot while standing in the line. And what we find out is that she's actually fantasizing about a guy in the line that she can only see the back of the head of, which is the joke. But of course, she's fantasizing, and of course, she's off on her own little world for most of the episode. She's just fantasizing about this guy in the back of the line and about how it's just this funny thing where they do a meet cute in the middle of the line, and she never once sees his face. She only fantasizes about him, the back of his head, and him talking through the back of his neck. But yeah, she fantasizes through all that, and they wind up going off and doing a thing. But and I'm going to mention that because that's this whole thing where she sees him standing in line, imagines them going on a date, getting married, and her becoming a successful businesswoman. Then she sees a woman walk up to him and talk to him, and it's revealed that he actually just keeps spare tampons in his pocket for emergencies. And because of that, she thinks that they're going through a rough patch until she finds out the truth, and then decides to take him back. Only to discover that he has a tattoo on his face that she thinks he did for a promotional stunt, and decides to opt out. So yeah, she has this whole emotional arc while standing in the middle of the line. But in any case, as Terry and Corvo are standing in line, we actually meet a man named Linus who shows up after paying a guy and getting him to leave. And what we quickly find out is that Corvo at this point is ready to leave and is ready to just take off because he's got shit to do. But it's at this point where Linus shows up, and what we find out is that Linus is effectively Terry's quote unquote line husband. As we find out, Linus is a guy who apparently has a very long history of standing in line with Terry, and has actually been teaching him a lot of tips and tricks about what he knows, and that they are apparently very close because of his standing in a lot of lines, which causes Corvo to become very jealous, and he decides to stay in line and wait it out. But and of course insists that he's not going to leave, and he's going to learn more about line etiquette so that he can stay with Terry, and also introduces him as Terry's actual husband, and also life partner, and also just establishes that they are indeed a couple, which of course the two of them do continue to just chat up their line etiquette. What we find out is that Linus actually does indeed appreciate Terry and how he can stand in the line like a pro, but and also kind of chides Corvo a little bit, pointing out that he's obviously new at this and that he hasn't quite learned how to stand in line. And obviously the two of them are exchanging stories. So to fit in, Corvo explains about the time he tried to get into the express checkout lane at the local supermarket and had to change lanes because he realized that he had too many items. But which Terry points out isn't all that interesting a story. But of course Linus points out that everybody has to start somewhere. But it's also at this point where we actually do see a bit with the Pupa where he goes off to seemingly fight Godzilla, and that episode never fully explains what exactly it is that's going on. We only ever see the Pupa fighting Godzilla, what seemingly is Godzilla, from over the top of the skyscrapers, and obviously Corvo wants to leave to go look at that, but Terry keeps insisting that he needs to stay in line. But in case it's at this point where Terry reveals that he actually has to go to the bathroom and that he needs to leave, but of course Corvo is more than happy to save his place in line. But then both Linus and Terry laugh at him and reveal that that's actually not what you're supposed to do in line, and what you're actually supposed to do is do a line check where you leave and everybody just kind of honors the fact that you left line to do something else. You claim a line check and then you leave. And Linus reveals that he actually doesn't like a quarterback to sound cool. So and with that, Terry then proceeds to call a line check and leave and go to the bathroom. Even though Corvo explains how they don't actually need to pee or poo, Terry just explains how he just goes to sit on the toilet to calm down a little bit, and that's it's the only place where he's able to chew gum because, as he explains, he can't chew gum in front of other people. He's conscious about that. But in case he leaves to go to the bathroom stall for a bit and go chew gum, and it's at this point where Linus then proceeds to reveal his true colors. He immediately confronts Corvo and immediately tells him that he's not going to let Corvo come in as a newbie and steal Terry away from them, pointing out that he and Terry have a good thing going and that he doesn't want Corvo messing it up. And Corvo quickly realizes that Linus is a bit two-faced, and points out that and reveals that he actually had heard of humans being two-faced before, but he's never actually seen it in person. And does point out that Linus needs to back off, because there's a very good chance that Terry will eventually figure out that he's actually not the nice guy that he thinks he is. But Linus points out that Terry isn't going to find out, and that's the way they're going to keep it. At which point Terry comes back in line and winds up standing in the line with them, and he returns from his line check. And it's at this point where Corvo tries to tell Terry what exactly it is that was going on, about how Linus was a bit two-faced, and tells Linus to show him his other face. But Linus not only refuses to acknowledge what he's talking about, but also proceeds to point out that maybe Corvo is just getting into just lying to make himself look bad, to make Linus look bad. But which Corvo, and of course Terry does indeed take Linus' side, and it points out that maybe Corvo's a little bit jealous. But Corvo merely points out, and he then reveals what the crystal on his uniform is for. But he reveals that he wears cool robes and has a crystal that makes him levitate. And it's revealed that that's what the crystal is, and tells him that he will never actually be jealous of Linus. And of course, Linus just points out that it's not really all that big a thing, and that some people can't play with the big dogs. But of course, Corvo insists that he's not going to leave the line, and that he's going to stay and continue to stay in the line with Terry. And it's at this point where we actually see another snippet of the sting with the Pupa, where now he's fighting a robot with as well as Godzilla, and the storyline, Corvo openly admits, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's funny. But in any case, as they're standing in line, Terry is still insistent. Corvo's still insistent that Linus is being a bit two-faced. But it's at this point where Linus leaves to go take a call from somebody, and it's at this point where Corvo points out that. Where Corvo continues to insist why Terry continues to hang out with Linus, but he immediately points out that Linus is cool and that they've been hanging out for a long time, and he knows him to be a very nice guy. But Corvo insists that he isn't, and insists that Linus isn't to be trusted. But and of course points out that obviously and Terry points out that obviously they know a lot of things together and have stood a lot of lines. But Corvo once again points out that he doesn't really trust Linus, and also points out that. Obviously he knows that standing in lines is an important thing, and that he decided to do a hobby with Terry, and that he ultimately just wants to be there for Terry, and points out that obviously if Linus is going to cut away with that, he's not going to be particularly happy with it. And so this way where Linus comes back, but Corvo actually decides to do something smart, insisting that he tries, and Linus tries to get back in line and tries to point out that he was sorry he stepped away for a while. But it's at this point where Corvo points out that Linus never called a line check, which means he's not allowed to get back in line. He now needs to either get back to the back of the line or go find a new line to stand in. And of course, Terry is very impressed by the fact that Corvo had picked up that rule very quickly, and points out that obviously Corvo is right. That Terry called Linus never called the line check, and that's how he needs to leave. At which point Linus flies off the handle and insists and points out that he obviously knows that obviously he's not going to take this standing line down, and insists that he's going to make a much cooler line that is going to surpass their previous line. And of course Terry points out that that's a bad idea, because against all the codes against standing in line. But Linus insists that he doesn't care, pointing out that line is quite literally in his name. At which point he climbs up onto a nearby light post, and tells everybody that he's going to be forming a cooler, more efficient line, and tells everybody if they want to join up with his line that they're more than welcome to. And of course, because Linus is a pro and everybody knows who he is, several people just kind of leave and go stand in line behind him, and he forms a line on the other side of the door where they're trying to wait. And this causes Terry to become a little bit upset, mainly because Linus just broke a whole bunch of apparent line etiquette rules where they're not supposed to leave line, let alone form another one. And also gets a little bit mad at Corvo for breaking up a Category 5 line, and points out that they don't happen very often, that he's very upset. But Corvo merely points out that he was only following the rules that Terry established, and Terry does kind of calm down a bit after realizing that Corvo was in fact just following line etiquette, and is very happy at him for following line etiquette. At which point Corvo insists that Terry is a pro, and that he obviously doesn't need to worry about what Linus is doing, and that as long as he's the best at standing in his own line, he'll be perfectly fine. But of course Terry points out that because Linus's line is full of pros, that obviously it means that his line might very well be picked over theirs to come into the store first. But of course Corvo insists that even though not everybody in the line is not particularly up to standing in the line, he does point out that it's ultimately Terry's resolve to actually stand in the line that will wind up winning the day. And Terry, taking this profound thing about how the line was inside of him all along, he decides to up his game and decide to up his line standing antics, and insists that he and Linus are now going to dance. Metaphorically, of course. They can't leave the line, or they'll both have to leave. But of course, they do eventually start standing in line. But then eventually the store does open. But Terry notices something isn't quite right, and of course, what we find out is that apparently the person Linus had gotten into a call with is the owner of the store, and that Linus actually has an insider to those little incident. And of course, it's also I should mention that at this point the fight between the Pupa Godzilla and the giant robot have resolved to the point where they're giving out free PS5s, and of course they don't point out that doesn't really. Corvo even points out that doesn't really make any sense. But of course Corvo is determined to help Terry win his line standing game, and pulls out a giant ray gun. But Terry points out that he doesn't want to resort to cheating, and that he wants to finish his resolve, but he wants to finish by his own resolve, and that he wants to have the line picked first. And Corvo decides to maybe honor that. And of course he points out that obviously he does understand why Terry likes standing in lines now, but then proceeds to tell Terry to close his eyes, and that and picture him his resolve, and hopefully things will work out. And Terry does close his eyes, but then it's revealed that Corvo actually tricked Terry, and then proceeds to use his levitation powers and his ray gun to turn Linus's line around and make it seem like it's leaving the store rather than entering it. And also pins them in place also pins their feet in place so they can't actually leave. But and of course the shop owner, seeing this, then decides to actually let Terry's line in first, and Terry is very happy about being able to be first in the store. While Linus lets out a series of swears and other things, pointing out that and he's not going to let them get away with this, and that he will get them back for this if it's the last thing he does. At which point they go into line, and they get some food and some new sneakers, because apparently the store has both. And they then sit down, and Corvo finally realizes why Terry likes to stand in line so much, and that it's basically the epitome of the human experience. But Terry reveals that he just likes standing in line for new stuff, which of course infuriates all of the messaging and all of the wholesome messaging behind the fact that Corvo finally learns the resolve to be able to stand in line, and learns how the importance of being able to stand in line and being able to support somebody in an episode where that literally has nothing to do with any of what's going on. They literally were just standing in line. That had nothing to do with any sort of moral or anything else. It's literally just standing in line, and conflict just kind of happens. But of course, at this point, when the Pupa eventually comes back, shrinks down, and also Young Lad comes back, and with his T-shirt in metal, and tells them how he ran out Decathlon and how it was the best line ever. But it's at this point where Terry actually takes the T-shirt away from him, and reveals that the reason he has so many T-shirts is because apparently he won't let anybody else be the T-shirt guy. He just takes them away from everybody else, and they are not allowed to be the T-shirt guy. But in case the Pupa then comes, but in any case, as the Pupa comes back, Corvo wonders what exactly it is he's been, and the Pupa just winds up shouting out just a bunch of random gibberish that really don't make any sort of sense, and of course the Corvo points out that they need to work on the Pupa's communication issues. At which point Linus comes in with his quote unquote new line husband and in an effort to try and make Terry jealous, but Terry tells him to take a hike and saying that he's got all the husband he needs right there, and of course Linus then proceeds to leave very angry about the fact that he wasn't able to get a rise out of Terry, but Corvo then points out that hopefully they won't have another episode where it's all going to be connected, and does get increasingly frustrated about that fact, pointing out that he's not going to deal with any more of this streaming made for internet bullshit, and that if the next story continues where the previous one left off, he's going to be very upset. But then the credits cut him off in the middle of a sentence, and it's implied that that's exactly what's going to happen. But yeah. So in any case, this episode was literally just them standing in line. There's literally nothing else I can explain to you about that. Is them standing in line. That is all I can tell you. But yeah, it's a fun episode. It's a stupid episode, but it's a fun episode, and I enjoyed it. But yeah, this episode was essentially just them standing in line, and conflict just kind of happened, and the plot kind of happened around them rather than to them. So yeah, it's just a funny episode. They set it up in the previous episode that Corvo was that they were going to be standing in line, and then Corvo goes into the credits and they're still standing in line, but then it's just revealed that was an entire plot of an episode and that it's connected to the previous one, which is funny. But yeah, in any case, I got nothing else to say about that. They literally just stood in line for a whole episode. I don't really know what else to say, and then just shenanigans happened because of that. There's literally nothing else I can explain about that. That's literally all that happens. But in any case, I think I was gonna leave this episode here. But standing in line, standing in line is apparently very intense, and I don't really know how I feel about that. But in any case, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this review. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on with the channel, that is the best way to do that. Be sure to check out my Patreon. I mainly use it to fund projects, so be sure to go check that out. You can find it, the link is down in the description and over on the end screen. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen as well. The top video is the most recent one, whereas the bottom video is based on what you've already seen from me. So, yeah, go check either of those out. I have no idea where they're going to send you. Just go check them out. I have no idea. But, yeah, in any case, just go check them out. And, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.